there are still people stranded on cruise ships right now.
The passengers are now home, but we cannot forget about all of those crew members who are still stuck at sea.
I have no idea when I'm going to be able to get off of the ship. We're healthy. We want to go home.
Hey y'all, it's Bucky and welcome back to our channel. How are y'all doing? Today's video is completely different than our normal Southern Snacker videos, but it is a video that I feel like needs to be shared. Today, we are going to be talking about how there are still people stranded on cruise ships right now. I feel like mainstream media isn't talking about this as much as they should. I felt like at the beginning of this pandemic, whenever you turned on the TV, you always heard something about, you know, the cruise industry and the cruise ships, the passengers on the ships. And as soon as they let all the passengers off the ships, it kind of went silent. But what about the crew members? Basically, if you're watching this and you are new to our channel, welcome. But if you have been subscribed to us, you probably know that I actually used to be a performer on cruise ships. And on my first contract, I actually met Emily. Emily was one of the girl singers in my cast and we became very good friends. She went back this year for another contract, and of course this pandemic happened and COVID-19 basically turned 2020 upside down. And she is actually still stuck on a cruise ship. I reached out to Emily to see if she would be interested in doing this video with me, and luckily she said yes. So I actually sent her several questions to kind of get her feedback, her point of view, her thoughts. I just thought it would be so interesting for y'all to hear her side and just to actually hear from somebody that's experiencing it firsthand. So we are going to get into the questions very soon, but I am going to leave all of Emily's information down below in the description box, her Instagram, her YouTube channel, so go check her out, show her some love. But now, let's get to the questions. How long have you been on the ship, and when was the last time that you were actually on land, and where was that at?
We've been on the ship since December, but we have been on the ship without passengers since mid-March. So March 14th was the last day that we were told that we weren't going to be doing any new sailings. The last place that we were on land was in Cozumel, and that was about March 13th, I think. I don't remember the exact date, but that was the last time we were on land. So it's been well over a month now that we have not been on land.
So her contract actually started in December, y'all, and it has been over a month that they haven't even had passengers on board. So all the passengers just got to go home, and she's still on there. That's crazy. All right, so next question. Where is your ship at currently?
Currently, right now, as I'm recording this, we're docked in Miami, but for the most of the time that we've been under this quarantine, we have been anchored outside of Tampa, and then more recently, in the last few weeks, we've been anchored outside Coco Cay, which is Royal Caribbean's private island that they own. We're not allowed to dock except to get supplies, so we are just anchored and floating in the ocean, and that's where we've been hanging out.
All right, so next question. What has the experience been like on the ship during the pandemic?
The experience on the ship during the whole pandemic has been, I imagine, as crazy as it has been on land. The information we're getting is constantly changing, so we never have a sense of security about anything because we never know what's going to happen. We'll be getting given one set of information, and then the next day, immediately things change. Initially, when we first locked down and we first stopped our sailings, things were a little bit more relaxed. Because this was happening at the same time that the whole world was finding out about it. So we were finding out about everything at the same time as the US. And we are a US company, so we were kind of going along with what the US was doing at the time. So we actually locked down before most of the US had started locking down. So we didn't really know in the very beginning the extent of what everything was going to be. So initially we had thought it was just going to be 30 days with no passengers and we were going to resume service. We also thought we didn't have any cases on board. So we were kind of just biding our time, waiting to see. We didn't know if we were going to get to keep our jobs. We didn't know if we were going to get sent home. We really didn't know what was going on. And then it very rapidly unfolded out in the outside world, but also on the ship as well, where we started realizing that we might have cases on board. And so, you know, securities and things got tightened up, and we got a lot of things that we were allowed to do taken away. We stopped having group outings. We started social distancing. We stopped serving ourselves in the buffet. We weren't allowed to touch any utensils or anything like that. And then eventually we got put into complete isolation, meaning they took every crew member, put them all in their own room, and we were not allowed to leave our cabins for what ended up being 17 days. So all food and drink was delivered to us in our cabins, and we couldn't go outside for anything. And this was done as per the CDC. And I understand why we had to do it. We did have cases on board, and this was a way to stop the cases from spreading. And then after the 17 days were up, we were told we were going to have a 72-hour sort of re-entry into being outside of isolation, where we were allowed to go out for just our meals, but the rest of the time we're in our cabins. But then we were told that that is going to extend for 15 days. So we have now been in that for 15 days. So we have been in our rooms for basically 21 hours of the day, and then we can go out for an hour at a time per meal. And that's basically been our life. So when we finish that, which is supposedly tomorrow, we will have done basically 30 days of isolation on the ship.
It's crazy like hearing that they've been basically in self-isolation for over 30 days. I mean, think about it. I've even been kind of freaking out and kind of going a little bit stir crazy, but I can still go outside. I can still go for a run in my neighborhood. Like, I literally can't imagine being stuck in those little rooms for over 30 days, for basically 24 hours of the day. It's insane. All right, next question. What have you been doing on the ship to actually occupy your time?
To occupy the time, watching a lot of movies, watching a lot of TV, reading a lot of books, talking to people back home. We do have Wi-Fi, so we're able to use the internet. We can speak to people back home, although the internet is not very good, so it's not always the easiest thing, but at least we have it. But there's been a lot of downtime and a lot of boredom, especially in the 17 days when we were confined strictly all the time to our cabins.
Any outlook as to when you will be able to get off the ship?
I have no idea when I'm going to be able to get off of the ship. I was supposed to get off today, but I found out a few days ago, well, more than a few days ago, I found out about a week ago that I wasn't going to be able to get off today. Basically, the ship is trying to get us off and trying to send the crew members home, but we are being hindered by, we're told, the CDC and the government. And the regulations are changing so fast that every time they make a plan to send somebody home or to send a group of nationalities home to their home country, the regulations change before we can follow through with the plans. So we keep making new plans. They keep telling us, we're going to try this day, we're going to try to send you here, we're going to do this, we're going to try this, and nothing ends up happening because the regulations change so fast that we can't keep up. So we were supposed to have all started being sent home about a month ago, but my ship, personally, all of our crew members are still on board. We were able to get 7 Americans off 2 weeks ago, and that's because they lived in driving distance to the port in Miami. There are still 3 Americans on board right now, myself obviously being one of them, and we don't live in driving distance to Miami. And so there's all these regulations, and basically I'm not allowed to fly, I'm not allowed to enter an airport, I'm not allowed to come in contact with the public, I'm not allowed to rent a car, I'm not allowed to take public transportation, I'm not allowed to get in a taxi. So the only way I can go home is if I am driven by the company by a car that is sanitized and the driver of the car is certified to know how to dealing with COVID-19, whatever that means. But it's making it basically impossible. So no, I have no idea when I'm going to get home or when anybody else is going to get home, but I hope it's soon.
I've been talking to Emily for basically since all of this began. I was actually on a cruise right at the beginning when all of this happened. I was hoping to meet up with her down in Miami because we were actually ported in Miami on the same day, but the port in Miami was just crazy, so that didn't actually get to happen. But I have been talking to her throughout this whole month and a half, and every time I talk to her, she's always so hopeful that, you know, she's gonna get to go home so and so day, or it's like, oh, maybe tomorrow. And then I'll talk to her again and she's like, nope, it didn't happen. She said that she basically has all of her stuff just packed and just like waiting for them to just be able to say, hey, you can get off the ship today. It's crazy. All right, next question. Do you think the cruise industry will ever be what it was? Do you think that it will go back to normal? What are your thoughts on that?
I think eventually the cruise industry is going to return to normal, but it is going to be a long time. It seems like a lot of blame is being put on the cruise industry for the virus, which is really kind of silly because there's just as much risk of traveling by air or any other means of travel that you could be coming in contact with the virus. Obviously, you don't want to be stuck on a cruise ship held up with people that have the virus, but we didn't really know what was happening with this until it happened. So here we are. I think that people are still going to want to cruise, but I think it's probably going to take a vaccine being created before people are really comfortable fully cruising again the way that it was before. I hope that the cruise industry comes back because even despite all of this, I like my job. I want to keep my job. This experience sucks. It's a huge bummer. I want to go home. But I still want my job. I want things to be able to go back to the way that they were before. I want people to be able to cruise again. I want to be able to do my job again. So I'm hopeful that things will eventually get back to normal, although it may take a long time.
And I sent her this question because I've seen so many people saying that they will never cruise again. I do personally think that the cruise industry will go back to normal. Yes, like she said, I think it will take some time. And I hope that it goes back to normal because I love cruising. I love performing on cruise ships, and I also love cruising as a passenger. So those are basically the general questions that I sent her. I didn't want to get too personal and too in-depth into all this, but I did want to ask, some things that I find interesting hearing about, that we've talked about personally, and that I thought that y'all would like to hear as well. And I also didn't want to go too in-depth because even right now, there are crew members that have filed lawsuits against the cruise lines. I just didn't want any of that to kind of affect this video, and I didn't want to go into too much detail. Better safe than sorry. But even though that was all the questions, I did ask if there was anything else that she would like to share or add, just because I know that my questions were pretty basic, and this is such a serious situation throughout the whole world. It's a serious situation, but especially in this unique situation, especially with them being still stranded on a cruise ship. So this is what else she had to add.
I think there's a lot of blame being placed on the cruise industry around the world right now, and maybe there is some blame to go somewhere, but it seems like it's being taken out on cruise ship crew. And the people that work on cruise ships are singers and dancers and cooks and cleaners and musicians. We don't have anything to do with the calls that the company makes. I don't make any calls about whether the company should be sailing, when there's a pandemic or something. So the fact that we're being all held here seems like a huge stab in the face, and the fact that it's by the government and the CDC more so than our own company. I'm not saying the companies have been perfect, because there's probably things they could have done differently, but this is an unprecedented situation where nobody really knows what they're supposed to do. So it's frustrating because we're not the reason that this happened, and we just want to go home. And the world is treating us like we're these diseased monsters that shouldn't be allowed off of the ships, and we're quarantining for twice the amount of time that they make anybody else do it on land, and we're doing much stricter regulations on board than anybody is doing on land. I mean, we're wearing masks, we're sitting 6 feet apart from each other, people watch us wash our hands, we're not allowed to touch cutlery, we're not allowed to touch plates. We are following the protocols that we're supposed to follow, and we just want to go home. And the government and the CDC and whoever else is in charge of it needs to realize that we're not going to be spreading this disease more than is already being spread. We're clean ships. Most of the ships are clean. Nobody's trying to get off of a ship that has the virus currently on it, because we're not allowed. We know that that's not going to happen. Those people are all still isolating. Most of these ships have done the isolation process already, and we just want to get off now. We're healthy. We want to go home.
And just hearing that last part, like, I just want to go home, I can't even fathom. I mean, it's hard enough me being at my home, not seeing my parents, not seeing my friends. But to be stranded in the middle of the ocean, not even being able to really leave your room much, I can't even imagine. Emily, thank you so much for doing this video. Basically, you can see that this is an ongoing issue that needs to be resolved. And just like what she said, she wants to go home. And I feel like these crew members have kind of just been forgotten about. You just don't hear much about it, and they've just literally been stuck out in the middle of the ocean for over 40 days in self-isolation in small little cabins on a cruise ship. And the CDC, the cruise line industry, please get something done, please. Anyways, y'all, I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it was super different than what we normally do on this channel, but I did feel like it needed to be heard, it needed to be shared, and I wanted Emily to be able to share her experience with y'all. So Emily, thank you again so much for doing this video with me. And Emily, hopefully you are able to get home soon and that all the crew members are able to go home, because really, y'all, that's what needs to be done, and it needs to happen very soon. Thank y'all so much for watching, and just remember, when life gets tough, just keep on snacking. Bye, y'all.